Hey everybody, Ketwolski here, checking in with another one of our hashtag Lower Decks episode review videos. Today, of course, we are going to be talking about episode 7, Much Ado About Boimler. So, like I do every week, my goal today in this review video is going to talk a little bit about what the plot of the show was. I'm going to share some of the moments that I really enjoyed, and then kind of get into some of the things I may not have actually enjoyed, and talk a little bit more about some of my theories and thoughts around the overall thematics of this full season. So right off of the bat, we're kind of introduced to the A and B plot of the story. The A plot is essentially Mariner and her friend, who is the, babysitting captain, who's coming to the Cerritos to kind of look after it because the main captain, Ransom, and Shax are all off on this really cool mission, which we'll get to that in a minute. But this babysitting captain that Mariner used to know back in her academy days is coming over there to kind of hang out, and then Mariner has to kind of engage with her as her appointed #1, officer from the Cerritos to interface with her. And then we have the B plot of this situation, which is Boimler getting accidentally phased a little bit through the transporter accident, a good old classic TNG style transporter accident, as they say, and he's kind of a bluish phase. He has like this loud sound to him, and then they get rid of that, and he's kind of like this bluish phase, and he has to go to the farm where they kind of supposedly store Starfleet officers who go through these weird accidental situations, and they kind of get put in this location that Starfleet funds in order to allow them to heal and not have to really worry about, going back to Earth or going to another planet or, having to continue to try to serve with their deformities or whatever it is. So those are our kind of main two plots of this episode. Rutherford didn't really have anything to do in this entire episode other than causing the accident with Boimler, and Tendy's whole the dog thing doesn't, I don't think, count as a full plot by itself. I think it's kind of tucked a little bit inside of the B plot, which is the Boimler situation, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. So right off the bat, one of the things that I really did enjoy was actually seeing Mariner interact with different people that we haven't seen before. We know how she kind of reacts to the senior bridge officers of the Cerritos and how she interacts with the lower decks crew, but this is her kind of reacting and kind of being around other Starfleet officers that she kind of likes, specifically her friend, the other captain, the babysitting captain. She kind of likes her, and their whole kind of conflict there is centered around the captain potentially offering Mariner a position on her ship, which is away from the Cerritos, and would involve her getting promoted and rising up back again through the ranks. And there's just a lot of wacky hijinks that goes on with Mariner trying to throw off this other person so that she doesn't want to hire her. She kind of makes a lot of mistakes. She forgets supplies. She acts like she doesn't know how to use equipment, which is not in congruence with the character that we've gotten to know over the last 6 episodes prior to this one. So it was definitely, we were as the audience, were definitely aware that she was up to something. It wasn't quite clear as to why she was necessarily acting that kind of weird in that kind of weird way until at the end of the episode was kind of revealed. But I'll get into my thoughts on that towards the end. But I did like that interaction a lot between Mariner and these other Starfleet officers and kind of showcasing her, broader personality and kind of getting a little bit more knowledge about who she was prior to the show's start. Another thing that I really loved about this episode was the fact that they brought back the cool black ninja pajamas for the super secret operation mission that the captain and Shax and Ransom had to go on. I really loved that. And, they could have put them in anything. They could have come up with a different reason for them not to be there, but I just like the fact that they brought them back and they were wearing the cool, little black ninja outfits. And I like how when they hailed them in the sequence, you see Ransom back there working out, doing his own thing. The captain's super excited about the mission, and then Shax just looks so defeated and so sad because he probably is on a stealth mission, which is the opposite of what Shax wants to do, which is blow stuff up. So, he's probably super bored, essentially. So, but I loved that. I thought that was great. One of the other things that I really enjoyed about this is we get to see this new NX-class ship. We don't actually know what the classification of it is just yet. It does have a name on there, but I don't want to call it the actual, just in the name of the ship. It could be the case, but that would be like calling the Cerritos the California. I'm sure there is something like that, but this is an NX-class ship. It looks a little kitbash in some regards. It looks a little darker, a little bit more grungier, very Section 31-esque, but it's not Section 31, it's Section D14, which apparently has to do with taking Starfleet officers who have been injured in the line of duty and kind of taken them to this place called the farm where they're taken care of and they're pampered to their every needs. And it's essentially just this, utopian paradise that they get to live inside of as they heal their wounds or kind of just live out the rest of their, unnatural lives, so to speak. So I liked the ship. I love the idea of D14. I love the whole construct there. It was very interesting, very unique. I thought it was great. Speaking of D14, we also saw the captain of the ship that picked up Boimler and Tendy and the dog. and I loved his character. Obviously, we haven't seen this particular race of beings since the original animated series, which I actually thought was a great callback to something that is usually kind of ignored in a lot of ways, which is the animated series is kind of like the redheaded stepchild of the entire franchise. I know some people would probably disagree with that now with, you know, all of the new Trek stuff, but I think it's still kind of, on the whole, kind of this redheaded stepchild of, you know, Star Trek, because really in the animated series, a lot of canon-breaking things happened, and it was kind of wacky and wonky and kind of this weird thing, but I love it. I think it's great for what it is, and I love the fact that they were calling back to it clearly with this episode, and I love this character. Very creepy, very spooky, and definitely played on me very well. Like, I actually thought Mike McMahon and the company were gonna create a situation where they were just trapping these poor officers on this ship for eternity. I didn't think they were gonna go to the farm, and I was actually at the point, like in an episode, during the episode, I was like, during my first watch through, I was like, wow, are they gonna do this? Are they actually gonna do this thing where they actually have to mutiny and they have to do some kind of lesson here? It was kind of weird. I was like, oh, this is kind of strange, but obviously they flipped that, you know, and subverted my expectation at the end there. But yeah, I thought the character was great, and I like how they kind of, you know, poked fun at his weird evil laugh that he did at the beginning of the episode. At the end, he's like, that's just my laugh. I just laugh really weird. I thought that was really funny. I thought that was a cool, like, kind of like a corny little joke there. Another thing that I really did enjoy about this episode was all of the different designs of the other kind of mutated officers that were heading towards the farm. If you look at this episode and kind of go back through and really look at some of the designs kind of hanging out in the background, you see a lot of like little Easter eggs, you see a lot of great references, and then you also see a lot of unique designs, and I thought that was great. I love the old man and the young baby, kind of one is getting older, one is getting younger, like, I don't know, like half a reverse Benjamin Button type situation going on. I thought that was really cool. I like how they all kind of felt very unique, even though they didn't really have any lines necessarily other than some of their introductions and stuff like that. But I like how when you go back through, you're like, oh, I recognize that one, I see that one, I know what that one is. Like, I thought that was cool. They definitely spent the time to potentially think about like, what would have happened to this person and what would that reaction kind of look like? I wonder if the writers kind of went through that process, or if maybe they were just like drawing kind of crazy creatures and they threw a Starfleet uniform on there and they kind of let it go. I don't know, but yeah, I like the look of all the creatures. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this episode was this sequence here where Rutherford's kind of like running through the hallway to get to the transporters. It reminded me very much of Star Trek 2009, very much of Chekhov, you know, and I like how it was like, oh, I've got to activate the transporter, and I can do this, I can do that, look, 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 look. And, you know, Anton obviously played that character, and he has passed, and that's very unfortunate, and, you know, rest in peace, Anton. And I thought that this may have been actually a little bit of a callback to that sequence from the Kelvin thing, which is kind of a bold move to reference a Kelvin movie thing. Now, obviously, running to a situation like that isn't super unheard of within Star Trek, but to me, like, when I saw the sequence, that's the first thing that popped into my head, and I think that that was intentional, and I thought it was great, and I thought it was a bit of a bold thing to kind of reference Kelvin stuff, which people are still kind of like on the fence about referencing in terms of Star Trek. They're kind of like, oh, I don't know, because, you know, 2009 was a big hit, and then Inner Darkness was kind of like, well, and then Beyond was kind of like lukewarm for a lot of people, even though I loved it. So if that is a reference to Star Trek 2009 and the Kelvin universe stuff, kind of a meta reference there, I appreciate it a lot. I thought it was great. I thought it was really well done. Finally, the really big thing that I super enjoyed about this, well, really the last two big things that I super enjoyed about this, is the weirdness of this episode. I've talked a lot about that on live streams and in my own video reviews, that Star Trek, this new Star Trek stuff, has really lacked a lot of that kind of mystical element of space travel and kind of going into the new frontier. And I understand that that's not really the mission of the Discovery or the Picard show, or even the Cerritos for that matter. But I felt like the franchise was missing something by lacking some of those mystical elements, you know, those kind of like otherworldly beings. And in this episode, we actually get two of them. One of them is this giant jellyfish creature here, which obviously is a bit of a callback to the jellyfish creatures from Encounter at Farpoint in the TNG premiere episode. That's very obvious. But overall, it's not like a direct reference. Overall, I think it connects back to a term that I think was coined by Star Trek Online, which was the cosmozoans, which is just these kind of cosmic beings that exist in ways that we don't really quite understand as spacefaring humans and other Federation, you know, races. And these cosmozoans kind of just exist, and they kind of just do their own thing, you know. And this very much registered as a cosmozoan in my mind, and I appreciated the fact that they bothered to put something like that in this show. I thought that was great. And then we get a second version of that, and even though this one, it was genetically enhanced, but it was definitely a more mystical kind of creepy, you know, sci-fi kind of fantasy element that was added into it. And that is, of course, the dog, which was played up a lot for laughs. I like how it turned into the box and kept rolling. The bat sequence where its eyes opened up into the bats I thought was great. And then how it like talked at the end and kind of flew away. It felt very much like a, I don't know, like a Sunday morning kids cartoon show or something. I don't know. But I like the fact that it was just this weird thing. It was just a weird creature, and now it exists in this universe, and it kind of just adds into that mystical element, that fantasy element of science fiction that Star Trek does have a good job at kind of pulling those elements in. They did it back in TOS, and they've done it a lot in TNG and Deep Space Nine, and even some regards, you know, Voyager and Enterprise, you know, and these mystical things that we don't quite understand. And they did a little bit of that in Discovery with the sphere, but it didn't really have a personality so much as it just knew everything and then it like defended itself. So it was kind of like that, but these ones I feel like are a little bit more, you know, lifelike. Like there's more life to them and there's much more interesting as to what's going on with them. So I really liked that. I thought that was a fantastic move by them. It was a really great job. Okay, so now I want to talk about one of the biggest things that kind of happened in this episode, and that is Mariner. We're getting a lot of character growth with her in this episode, and I was just talking to a buddy of mine a couple of days ago who felt like the character arc of Mariner in this one was very similar to that of the one in Moist Vessel in terms of where it ended at, which is the conclusion was similar, which is that she doesn't want to promote. And at the surface level, I would agree that the ends are kind of very similar in that regards. But I would actually say if you dig a little bit deeper, we're actually learning a lot about where her mind is at. So remember, Mariner got demoted for an unknown reason. We don't quite know. She was on the keto for a while. We don't really know what happened in that situation. We don't really know the circumstances that led her to feeling like being in Lower Decks was the better choice as opposed to having responsibility. Now, the responsibility piece is, I think, what we're really starting to get keyed in on with her, and maybe why it is that she got demoted, or maybe there's some kind of incident that happened earlier in her career. Now, we already saw a flashback where some of her friends got eaten by a shapeshifter, so that's already kind of life-changing, but, you know, par for the course, really, for Star Trek, living in the universe. But I want to draw attention to two key points here, which is inside of the third episode, which was Temporal Edict. During the argument that she's having with Ransom, she says that this is not my team, this is your team. And he kind of corrects her like, this is our team and we are Starfleet. Now, you can write that line off, and I did too at that point, which is like, she's just kind of being that kind of rebel, and she's like, I'm not associated with this loser crew that got captured. This is your problem, not mine. And that's the way I took it initially, but now in more context, I actually feel like she was maybe preparing herself mentally to distance herself from what was about to happen to the crew. Because remember when she said that, the crew had been kind of put outside and they were going to be crushed by the, you know, execution geode or whatever it was called. And I think that she was, you know, kind of separating herself a little bit from the realities that that crew was about to die, and she didn't want to feel the responsibility of that loss, and potentially even the loss of Ransom, and really the loss of the mission at that point. I think that it was kind of more of a like a psychic thing, that she was kind of putting up these mental barrier walls, and that's why she said the line in that fashion. Now, when you go ahead and look at Moist Vessel, her conclusion there is, I don't want to promote, you know, just for the sake of promotion. I don't want to just be in my mom's shadow on the Cerritos, which is kind of where she was at the end of that episode, which was being kind of underneath her mom's thumb. I think that when you consider all of the pressures that she was most likely under, which is the daughter of a Starfleet captain and a Starfleet admiral, to perform and be the best of the best, is probably enormous. So I think she's cracking a little bit underneath that pressure and kind of the pressure to perform. And I'm just theorizing that maybe something happened that she had responsibility over, where lives were lost and she was unable to cope with it, and she had to make a decision based off of her rank that cost the lives of people that she cared about, and that's why she's rejecting the rank and not quite sure who she is. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I'm starting to feel like we're getting a lot more of her character arc throughout this entire series, kind of spelled out for us in different ways, not necessarily super obvious, because even at the end of this one, she says something a little bit different to her friend, which is that I'm sticking out on Lower Decks until I kind of figure out who I am and kind of what it is, what kind of officer it is that I want to be. So it's kind of evolved from just straight up rejecting the concept of getting promoted to, I need to figure out who I am as a person before I can get back on that horse and kind of continue to lead a crew, which she is more than capable of doing from a technical and skill set standpoint. But I think like emotionally and mentally, there's something there that's preventing her from getting to that level, even though she was probably very close to it or very much right at that level when she got demoted and pushed back down to lower decks. So there's a lot going on there, and I wanted to kind of throw those different ideas out to you guys to see what you guys thought about it. All right, guys and gals, that does wrap up my review video for this episode. I did really enjoy it. Definitely was kind of on the low side with the jokes, but definitely high side with the story, and we got to experience a whole lot in this episode that I really, really enjoyed, and I can't wait to hear what you guys and gals thought about it. So if you enjoyed this video, please throw a like and a subscribe up, as it helps out the channel, and it allows you to stay up to date with all these new Star Trek news videos and all the reviews for the new Star Trek episodes. And then let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments down below. What do you think about my Mariner theories? What do you think about the dog? What do you think about D14? What do you think about the farm? What do you think about all that stuff? I'm curious to hear what you guys and gals think about that. Throw out that stuff down below, and we'll go ahead and get the conversation started. Live long and prosper, my Trekkies!